So with Man-Thing finally making his MCU appearance in the brand new Halloween special that Marvel Studios dropped not too long ago, Werewolf by Night, I figured it was time to go back and check out his first ever live action appearance in the 2005 Man-Thing. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Man-Thing. Directed by Leonard and starring people like Nevez as well as Jack Thompson and Rachael Taylor, this tells a story of a brand new sheriff coming to town and noticing that there is something killing people in the swamps. Before I get too far into this, I want to welcome you guys for stopping by here to another video, and today I'm very happy to be joined by a very special guest, very first time here on the channel, and that is Babb. We did a live stream not too long ago, well, a couple of months ago now that I think about it, over on our buddy Mike's from Did You See That's channel, and yeah, it was really great to get to know him, and ever since then I've been checking out his content. He does great movie related stuff over on his channel. He's a really talented guy and also has a really cool show called The Rendered Image, where he has a couple of his peers come together and they talk about modern movie news as well as touching on some nostalgic things. I definitely recommend checking out Babb's content. We're going to be hearing from him in just a little bit, but as usual, you can find the link to any of my guests down below in the description box. So go ahead, click that link down below, go subscribe to his channel, give him some love, let him know I sent you. But for now, let's get into my thoughts on Man-Thing. This is one of those movies that I only saw one time, and something you're going to hear Tyler say that I'm also going to say here is that at this point already, by 2005, we had already gotten a couple of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. We had gotten Wesley Snipes' Blade movie. We gotten the first couple X-Men films from Bryan Singer. And there were a couple other films that had already started to come out that were, you know, maybe not the most beloved, but were at least nostalgic and enjoyable for me. Things like the Fantastic Four film with Chris Evans in it, as well as things like Thomas Jane as the Punisher or Ben Affleck's Daredevil. Even something like Jennifer Garner's Elektra, which is not a great movie, and I have covered most of these over here on the channel, but they all had a nostalgic flair for me, and there was a lot of different Marvel related movies at this point already. This was still in the age when Marvel was licensing out their characters for movies versus them actually making movies on their own, as they would do just a few years later in 2008 with Iron Man. And so yeah, Man-Thing just now appeared in the MCU via the Halloween special that they recently released, which was great. It was great to see him in the MCU. It was a great hybrid of live action practical effects as well as digital effects to bring him to life, and ultimately I think they captured the tone of the character and threw him into this really well. He's a character that I've always enjoyed seeing in animated stuff or in the comics as this misunderstood monster creature that is a monster and has done monstrous things and at times can be a villain of a story, but a lot of times is that misunderstood monster that's in the swamps, very similar to Swamp Thing that DC has, which I would say that their first Swamp Thing movie is definitely worse than this, which I have covered here on the channel, and I'm going to be covering the second one very soon. But yeah, Man-Thing here 2005 is a pretty simple premise. They make Man-Thing a monster that's essentially a slasher. In a way, I kind of enjoyed this film because of the fact that it harkens back to almost a B-movie horror slasher feeling vibe. It takes place in a swamp, and something about it at times did feel very Friday the 13th, and some of the worst ones, I should say. But yeah, on its own, this is a pretty straightforward movie about a guy who's just taken a new job as a sheriff, comes into this small town in the Midwest, you know, is kind of having to start acclimating to this new area and the very interesting and unique town folk, and not long into being there, starts to discover that there are some bodies that are being uncovered that haven't been dead for very long, but they're coming back very strange. They're being mutilated, and they have different plant-like things that are coming out of the various holes and parts of their bodies that have been absolutely destroyed. So of course he decides to go and try to find what's causing this, and it turns out there's a big creature out there called Man-Thing. And so yeah, this is a horror movie that takes Man-Thing and just makes him a slasher villain essentially. Like I said, in the comics he has been a monster and a villain in plenty of stories, but they kind of tend to go with the misunderstood monster approach, which is what they just recently did in Werewolf by Night. So in the case of this movie, yeah, this is not a movie that is true to the comics or takes from various storylines of Man-Thing and tries to really expand upon that. They took a character from the comic books that is, you know, part of Marvel. They threw the Marvel logo on it and said, outside of the fact that this thing kind of looks like Man-Thing, this isn't really going to be much about Man-Thing itself. Something that Tyler's going to say and that I have to also say here is that you don't see a whole lot of Man-Thing in this movie until the very end. A lot of it is just him kind of, you know, in the shadows or moments where you kind of see his hand or you see over his shoulder and you know he's there, but yeah, you don't see a whole lot of him. A lot of the kills happen really quickly off screen. Some of it can be pretty gory at times, pretty bloody, but the rated R element of this film is fairly tame even for the year that this came out. And yeah, overall, Man-Thing is just a monster. That's all you got to know about this movie. There's a monster out there in the swamps. It just so happens to be Marvel's Man-Thing, and other than that, it has no real ties to the comic book origins or any of the storylines that you can find in the comic books for Marvel. So outside of that, what did I think of the movie in and of itself? It's not good. It's not a good movie. I overall found myself really bored while watching it. I had to watch it in two different sittings because I was finding myself getting pretty sleepy halfway through the movie and ultimately just disinterested. This is a movie that visually is just dull and kind of murky. I feel like there was an attempt to try to give it this look to kind of give it a swampy feel and vibe, and I'm not just talking about the locations but the overall just look of the film itself. There is this really over the top green filter that is just completely taking over the screen over the course of this movie, where literally things that should not be green are green simply for the sake of them adding some sort of filter over the camera or over the actual filmed content to kind of give it this very unique look, I guess, but ultimately it just makes the film look murky, gross, and it's just not an appealing film to look at. And if it isn't green, it's usually a bright yellow or orange or sometimes red. It always felt that like there was some sort of oversaturation or a filter that completely encompassed the screen everywhere that they were, to kind of just give this really strong impression of color and saturation in these areas that they went to. And so because of that, it completely sucks out any other color than the color filter that they would put over these scenes, whether it's the green, the orange, the red, the yellow, whatever the case may be. More often than not, there are things that should not be those colors in these shots that are absolutely that color, and especially most of it being green, the film just kind of looks gross, and it doesn't really have a nice style to it that I think that they thought that they were giving. And it really, there's no real meat and potatoes to the story. You know, you're just watching the sheriff trying to figure out what's going on. He's meeting the various town folk and trying to learn, you know, who's involved here. Does anybody know what's happening? Hey, do you know what's happening? Of course, there's the individuals who know about the monster out there and try to stay away, and then he tries to pry the information out of them. And then there's people who don't know about the monster. There's the dumb idiots that just go out there and end up being fodder for the monster. And in so many ways, this reminded me of just a bad slasher film. And because I love films like that, and I've covered plenty of them here because I'm a fan of like B-horror, there was an element of it's so bad it's good while watching this, but ultimately this was more on the bad side, and it didn't have the campy charm that some of the worst slashers have to at least make them endearing and enjoyable to watch. Now, I definitely have more to say about this movie, and I'm definitely going to talk on the second half of this review about what I actually enjoyed about this film. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and pass that over to my buddy Tyler Babb, and we'll get back to my thoughts in just a moment.
Hey guys, how you doing out there? Talking about Man-Thing. Thank you, Anthony, for letting me come on this review with you and talk about this movie. And man, oh man, this was a journey for me. I'm going to tell you right now. I don't know really what you've said about the film, but it took me 2 days to get through this film. It's not a very good movie at all. It's got a major pacing issue. I was 38 minutes into it, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, it felt like I was an hour into the thing. I was like, oh yeah, like I'm about an hour. Nope, I was only about 38 minutes in, and you feel the runtime here. Another thing is, this movie was made in 2005. So if you were alive back then, right, and you were watching movies back then, they kind of had a certain feel. But also, this reminded me a lot of early CW shows. So think of Smallville or, you know, the Aquaman, well, I guess this was a pilot, but they made an Aquaman show with the guy that played Aquaman in Smallville. But anyways, it felt very much like that, right? Like One Tree Hill or Supernatural or early 2000s CW show. all over this thing, and that's fine. Like, that tone is fine for, you know, a show, like a show runtime. I think it's perfectly fine. But for this movie, I think it was an hour and 38 minutes long. It felt like like 2.5 or 2:40. I mean, you feel this, and the characters, I don't care about anybody. Like, I gave it a shot, and I was like, all right, we're gonna really try this, and like, maybe, you know, it can't be that bad. But it's called Man-Thing, and it's got the Marvel, like, Entertainment, like, logo, the early Marvel logo that they, you know, when they would double up and partner with other studios like Fox or Universal or so-and-so, before the MCU, right? This is early days, and so I knew what I was getting into. I had never seen it before, right? Like, I'd always heard about it, and it's like, oh, it's one of the early Marvel movies, but it's not even really... It's strange to me because it's not even really early days. It is early days, but I mean, X-Men came out in 2000. We already had, by 2005, we already had 2 Spider-Man movies. So, like, and we had a Fantastic Four movie that was already out. Like, we had been kind of, you know, going through the paces and kind of learning what works and what doesn't. And I think, for me, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies are some of the best superhero movies ever made. I love those. Maybe it's nostalgia. Like, obviously, the new Marvel universe is great, but this just doesn't hold up on any front. And I feel, you know, DC's tried to make the Swamp Thing, right? If we want to even talk about that, and I just don't know if this character works. Now, if you've seen Werewolf by Night, I think they may have cracked this character, because I think he works very well in that 1-hour special, and I'm sure he'll pop up again in the MCU, but that was just kind of my thing. It's like, the movie's called Man-Thing, and he's not even in the movie. Like, they play this gag where it's like, you know, you barely see him. You know, he's killing people left and right, and you're just like, okay, like, when are you gonna, like, pay off? Like, there's a thing called setup and payoff, and they're setting things up, and it's like, okay, when are you gonna pay this off? Well, they don't pay this thing off until the final, like, 5 minutes of the movie, maybe a little earlier than 5, but still, it's like, dude, this thing is called Man-Thing, and he's not even in the movie, and it's focused on the sheriff, and specifically the early scene, where, you know, the first kill that we see, where they're like at the bonfire party, right? If you live where I live, you know, kind of out in the Midwest and stuff, it's like, that's very common, you know what I'm saying? Like, high school parties out in the woods, sitting by the bonfire, like out in the cornfields and stuff like that. Like, we didn't live by a swamp or anything like that, but I understand what that is. So, and that's also, again, very CW, very, you know, the tropes of the boyfriend and the girlfriend and the thing and that and everything, and it's R-rated, and I feel like they didn't even really they didn't really push the boundary for the R rating as much as I would have liked them to, but again, this is 2005, so it's going to be very tame. What did I like about this movie? I enjoyed the feeling that I got when it started, because I said, I was giving them props. I was like, oh wow, they're actually going for it, and it was a cool style, and it was very nostalgic for me, because, you know, growing up in the early 2000s and experiencing Spider-Man and experiencing those early 2000s superhero movies, like Daredevil and Elektra, even some of them, and the, you know, Ang Lee's Hulk, like, those have a special place in my heart, even though they're not all great. And some of them are bad, they're still, they have a warm spot in my heart. So I was like, oh, is this an untapped gem that I'm going to really enjoy? No. I mean, there's a reason why this didn't get any promotion, any marketing. They shoved this thing under the rug. They said, this is not what we want to do. And yet, Man-Thing, not even in the movie. And it was just this big, long stretch of just like, oh, we're gonna pull the same gag over and over and over and over again, and that got really annoying really fast. And you know, but I'm glad that I watched it, because it just, informs you as a moviegoer, right? You're able to basically, I'm going to go from this to watching probably Wakanda Forever. So it's a nice contrast. It's like I will be able to watch Wakanda Forever now and think of this movie because it's fresh in my mind, and I will just be able to enjoy Wakanda Forever that much more. So thank you again, Anthony, for allowing me to collaborate with you, and hopefully you guys enjoyed my opinion on the movie. Definitely go check it out and let us know in the comments what you thought of it, or if you've ever seen it, let us know. Are we wrong? Like, I would be very curious. Let's continue the discussion underneath this video in the comments. I'm sure Anthony will be there as well to talk about just how, I don't know, or maybe there's nothing else to discuss on this movie. I have no idea. But again, thank you, Anthony, for letting me come on this review with you, and I cannot wait to do more. So thanks, guys, and if you go subscribe to my channel, I really appreciate it. Check it out. We got a movie news show, The Rendered Image, that I co-host with my co-hosts Shannon and Christian, where we talk about all the movie news, DC, Marvel, Fox, Disney, all that stuff, Star Wars. It's all there, as obviously Anthony's a big Star Wars fan. So thanks, guys, so much, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
A big thanks to Tyler for joining me here in this video. I loved hearing your thoughts, man, and it seems like we're pretty much on the same page. And yeah, similar to you, even the most cheesy, nostalgic comic book movies of the early 2000s, like you mentioned, Daredevil and Elektra, I'd rather watch those any day over watching this one again. This is a movie, like I said, that I had only seen one time over in my life, and I just never really had the call to come back and watch this movie. There was nothing about it that made me want to see it again. And rewatching it, who knows if I'll ever watch this movie ever again. Maybe for just the sake of it being a Marvel property, maybe 10, 15 years from now, I'll have some sort of inkling to kind of go back and maybe have a laugh at it, but I can't see myself going back to this even for a cheesy purpose. Some of the older comic book movies of the 90s and the early 2000s that maybe aren't as strong as films that we have today sometimes still at least have that cheesy factor that you can go back and kind of dip your toes into and kind of remember a simpler time. This is a movie that I feel just ultimately was dull and bland and boring and really had nothing to really offer on a story level, a character level, a horror level, a romance level, or really anything. So I want to say, first of all, a big thanks to Tyler for joining me here in this video. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box, and I look forward to future content and future videos that we will do together 110%. Loved hearing your thoughts, and let's go ahead and wrap up my thoughts now on Man-Thing. So I mentioned before that obviously I haven't enjoyed this film. There's a lot about it when it comes down to the writing, the script, the performances, the overall look of the film that just isn't good. I just really didn't find myself enjoying this movie. There really wasn't much to it to really grip onto, but I did mention that there was something I enjoyed about the film, and what I would say is that there are times where I found the practical effects to be pretty solid, specifically Man-Thing. Now, in comparison to how Man-Thing looked in the brand new Werewolf by Night, it's night and day. It's not nearly as good as he looks in the new thing, but that makes sense. A lot of years have passed. Special effects have changed quite a bit. But in the case of this movie, they use mostly a practical Man-Thing, which I thought was a pretty awesome element. There are moments in the film where I really found myself really enjoying just looking at Man-Thing. He doesn't necessarily look as comic book accurate as I would like him to, but when he is on screen, especially near the later half of the film, I appreciated the fact that it was a big guy in a suit or some sort of big animatronic that ultimately was practical, and I think that ultimately is what made the Man-Thing element of this film really work. Unfortunately, the story around it, the movie itself, it's dull, it's bland, it's visually not appealing. There's not much about this that's really worth watching, to be completely honest, but as a movie that really showcases practical effects, I really enjoyed that, especially as a horror fan who loves that kind of stuff and loves that kind of stuff in slasher films. Without a doubt, there was a lot about this movie when it came to the look and the feel and the practical locations, and specifically the practical suit used for Man-Thing, that I found myself really enjoying. So I would say that without a doubt, that is where the film is at its strongest. I really appreciated that though Man-Thing looks a little stiff at times, and the CG around him when it is used isn't great, I did find myself enjoying that majority of what they used for Man-Thing was practical. That made me 110% more involved in the movie when he was on screen, but unfortunately it's for a short little window of time near the very end. end. I will say, honestly, I found myself pretty entertained with the last 10 or 15 minutes of the movie. Not because I thought they were great, or I was like, you know, bought into the story or the characters, or I was sitting there like really just lost in the stakes of what was going on and completely in love with these characters. Like it hadn't sold me or anything by the time we got to the end, but I was entertained with the last 10 or 15 minutes because at that point, Man-Thing is there and it's a full-blown just monster movie. And I think because he was practical and because there's so much going on action-wise and just people dying and stuff in the last 10 or 15 minutes, I was at least entertained. I didn't look away from the screen and I wasn't bored. Whereas, unfortunately, the first 75% of the film is dull, boring, it's murky, it doesn't look good. The locations are cool and a lot of the practical effects used are really solid, but nothing about the performances, the writing, nothing really grabbed me. I mentioned before about romance very briefly, and because, yeah, on IMDb, this is actually listed as an action, adventure, horror, romance. There is the most shoehorned in romance between the sheriff character and a woman that he meets in this town that just... It just didn't work. It just didn't work in this movie. It was rushed. It completely didn't sell me in any way, shape, or form. They try to get you to, you know, get into it to some degree. And in a way, this felt like a movie that would have premiered on the Sci-Fi Channel. And if somebody told me that this did premiere on the Sci-Fi Channel, I wouldn't be surprised. It felt like a movie like that. But again, I do want to praise the practical effects of this film. I think that that's where this movie shines. Unfortunately, the practical effects were wasted in a film that is not very good. So that's going to be the end of the video. A big thanks to you guys for watching this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and leave your comments. Have you seen this movie? Have you not seen this movie? Did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? And I definitely want to go ahead and implore you to go and check out Tyler Babb's channel. The link to his stuff is down below in the description box. Go give him some love. Let him know I sent you. But for now, I'll wrap up this video by saying, again, thank you so much to all of you guys for sticking through this video and watching us ramble about Man-Thing. Yeah, if you've seen Werewolf by Night and you thought Man-Thing was pretty cool and you want to see a little bit more Man-Thing, this movie is free on Tubi to watch with ads. And I would say it's at least worth watching for a It's So Bad It's Good or a It's So Bad, let me just see how bad it is kind of thing. Yeah, a big thanks to you guys for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.